and welcome to the Poultry Keepers podcast. I'm Mandolin Royal, and I'm here together with Rip Stalvey and John Gunterman, and we're your co-hosts for this show. And it's our mission to help you have happy, healthy, and a productive flock.
Another thing you can look at, too, is the feed cost per dozen eggs.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
That's a good number
we don't
to
talk
get.
about that.
We should talk about that. I wish I had the data for that.
There's just something else for you to do now, Mandy.
Actually, Jeff did that in the niche poultry book, whatever it's called, this edition. Cost per egg based on different feeds and husbandry techniques, and it's a start. We call that chicken math.
In order for me to collect that data with the way I'm set up, and I'm still doing the wrong thing of free choice feeding because I haven't swapped my feeders out. So I would have to track how many birds I have in a pen and how often I'm refilling that feeder to come up with a pounds per week average. And that would kind of get me close to the numbers I need. But since I'm
I think if
overfeeding,
you
it's going to
just
be
rough
inflated.
number it, say 4 ounces per bird per day.
I'm trying to talk myself into going out there every morning, giving them a measured amount and seeing how much is left at the end of the day and
I've got
adjusting.
my feed scoop. It's got a line that I drew with a Sharpie marker on it, which is about a day's worth. You know, there's dust at the end of the
Pens
day.
are set up. I might have 4 birds in there. There might be 12 birds. There might be 8. There might be 2. It depends.
It depends on what they're doing.
Yeah, and why they're in that pen and who they're in there
And you
with.
only have one feed formulation as well.
That's true.
Yeah, wait till you get down the road of mixing your own feed.
I'm not there yet. I'm nowhere close. In fact, I'm going to default to a small producer. I've got to draft my order, and I'm probably going to bring in 4 or 5 different recipes and try them on all the age-appropriate categories and see what differences I see. And the only way I'm going to get a fair trial out of that is to keep doing what I'm doing in a pen or 2, and then doing it dramatically different in other pens, and then watching those birds and let the birds tell me.
What I've noticed is a definite reduction in the amount of ammonia production by feeding an age-appropriate ration, because you're never giving them too much protein.
And too much protein will make extra stinky poops.
Yes. Quite coincidentally, or not, we need to have Jeff on to talk about that maybe.
Best thing I ever did was sit next to Jeff for 2 full days at a poultry show.
But feed cost is a real thing. And I'm actually, restocking on a lot of my base grains for my formulas now and noticing that, it's $12.50 a bag for whole corn, and it's $12.50 a bag for my whole oats, and $14.25 a bag for my wheat, and going, okay, how much does this actually equal out at the end? And I'm starting a spreadsheet to track to the penny how much each, ounce of food costs to make myself. I know I save money, but I also know my birds are a lot healthier.
Yeah, there's definitely some win-win involved, but now that's a whole other
there's a huge labor involvement, though. I mean, it's
the time investment.
At least every 2 weeks, it's a couple of hours mixing feed. And when we swell in spring, and we've got a lot of little mouths to feed, I'm mixing a fresh batch every week, and that's 2 to 3 hours start to finish. And with your numbers, you can't do that. Not unless you hire some interns.
Yeah, and I'm fresh out of interns. But anyways, we're getting way off topic.
No,
right,
no.
back to what we're talking about today.
Y'all are covering some good
bread
stuff.
to be eaten and the differences in meat texture. That's a fun topic.
Man, there's so many variables that come into play there. Each breed can be different.
Oh, yeah.
If they're bred to lay eggs, or if they're bred to be meat birds, or if they're dual purpose, you can get 3 basic different fleshing types there.
Yeah, the way that they're fleshed in, because if you look at like commercial hatchery leghorns, for example, they're going to be productive as heck, chances are. But when you go and you process them, they're probably going to be a little bit lean, and they're probably going to be a little bit stringy in the meat texture. Because when was the last time someone took that genetic pool and used them for food
Yeah,
from the meat
exactly.
side. I wonder how long it's been for some varieties since someone ate one. It could have been decades.
Well, I can remember as a kid that white leghorns back then were big enough you could get cockerels and process them for fryers. They
I'm
they were
definitely
large.
thinking
Today you can't. Just won't work. They're too small. So some breeds have undergone some changes.
Well, there's
so-
breeds that were specifically bred to be meat producers that have slowly shifted to being egg producers over the decades, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
well, you almost want to just process a couple and see if the type of birds you have are suitable for your palate. But it's also tricky to make that transition because if you're accustomed to store-bought Cornish cross commercial type hybrid strains, that meat texture is going to be significantly different than that of a 2-year-old spent productive layer who's at the end of her peak production. That texture difference is going to be incredible, and you can't take those old hens and process them and fry them. It's not going to be a good texture. The cooking method changes with age. So once you get out past 24 weeks, there's a tightening to the tissues where you want to start thinking about how you're going to brine them and prepare them, how you want to age them, and then how you want to cook them. Because you shouldn't go into older birds with a fast, high temperature cooking method in mind. You're going to want to do the exact opposite and go for low and slow, which John probably knows a lot more about the variety of recipes for older birds.
I would always, especially if you've got an old male, default to the coq au vin, or it means rooster in wine. Coq, C-O-Q-U, whatever in French, au vin, just means old rooster in wine, because you're actually using all that. And the rooster itself is producing so much testosterone over its lifetime. And that flavor is being absorbed by the meat, just like having a difference between a buck for goat meat and having a milker. And you can definitely taste the meat picks up the flavor of the male. The goat is kind of an extreme example, but it really,
Very
I think, sets the
extreme.
point. We eat a lot of retired dairy cows as beef here because I live next door to a 250 head dairy. So those definitely have a flavor that's very different than a commercial raised cattle. They're out on pasture all day and they have access to all the nutrients, and they are very, very spoiled as far as dairy cows go.
I'm sure they are.
But that, to me, that also changes the flavor of the meat. In the culinary world, we talk about terroir and taste of place, and just the natural forage, whether, and even unnatural forage, the feed that you're giving to your chickens. If you change that, ultimately the flavor of the meat will change. If they're out on pasture, that's going to be affected by seasonal availabilities to insects and, just everything.
Yeah, that's very true.
That's flavoring the meat. And so there's also, as you mentioned, there's a flavor shift that happens when they hit sexual maturity, but also there's a seasonal flavor shift depending on when in the year you're harvesting your birds. Basically, I found they taste a lot like what they were eating the last 2 to 3 weeks of their life.
I like to say 4 weeks because sometimes it can take 4 weeks before a dietary change becomes part of the flavor, but definitely a minimum of 2 weeks. And it's more apparent at 6 weeks.
Yeah. So pasture finished is definitely something I can taste the difference. If you have limited infrastructure, if you don't have a lot of pasture, at least give your birds their last couple of weeks out in some sunshine and some, just being chickens instead of cooped up in a pen.
So with the American breast, the preferred methods are to put them out on pasture early. Like you want them out there at 6, 7, 8 weeks old, scrounge it for whatever they can. And then at the very end, you go into a confinement finishing for 2 to 4 weeks.
But your males are also caponized before they hit sexual maturity. So they get really fat and plump.
Do it. They have them split by price in France based on if they were caponized or not. So for the capons, that's the most expensive way to get them. And it's stipulated in the regulations that they need to see all 4 seasons. They need to see spring, summer, fall, and they're served at Christmas. But the regular cockerels that are put on to finishing at like 14 weeks or so, that's about the cheapest way to get them overseas because they weren't caponized. They didn't grow them out for very long. They just threw them out, let them do their thing, brought them in for finishing, and then processed them. And they still did some fancy aging with them where they're dry aged for 10 days and wrapped in linen for the compression, for the marbling, and all that fancy stuff. But we don't go to those lengths in our operation. We're in Ohio. We're not in France.
But they're picking up, some extra intermuscular fat deposition and flavor in those last couple of weeks based upon that high protein, high fat diet you're giving them of corn and milk or cream, I believe.
It's almost a lowering of the protein because they've been pulled off the pasture. There's no more bugs. There's no more high protein snackage. It's just the corn, wheat, and milk. And it's mare's milk, not cow. I'm thinking of that correctly. But it's like they tank the protein so that it turns into a fat gain.
Well, this leads me to another question here. But what about the difference in the taste or flavor or whatever you want, even texture, between old hens and old roosters, old males?
So the sweetest chicken I ever had was 2-year-old breast hen. There was I don't know how to describe it, but it was a sweetness to the flavor that the boys just don't have. So if you want that chickeny flavor to be the focal point of the meal, you don't overspice it, you don't overseason it, you don't brine it for 24 hours. You just keep everything very mild, cook appropriately for the age of the bird, and let the chicken flavor be the flavor. Because it's there. You don't have to force it. You don't have to fake it.
That's where you're going to get your best schmaltz.
Oh, yeah. Especially if you let them go ahead and be fat and you increase that and you don't force them through the molt. You don't put them on a diet. You just let them be as fat as they're going to get. And it'll be an inch and a half thick on the backside. When you go and open up that bird, you're going to see fat everywhere. And you can harvest that out separately because it's too much for that one bird to cook in. And you can definitely separate it out and use it separately. I've done that. It's good stuff, especially when you go and you cook rice in it too.
Now we're talking, or dumplings.
Or dumplings, or
Yes.
soup, or a stock, and if you actually start experimenting and let's say you take a little bit of chicken broth and a little bit of vegetable broth and a little bit of beef broth and you almost do like equal parts of each one, that flavor, when those get mixed and you incorporate it into other dishes, we're starting to get a little bit culinary here, and I'm loving it.
Well, honestly, if I had to choose between the three, I'd go with chicken. Just straight chicken broth.
Oh, but the flavor nuance, just add a little bit of beef, a little bit of vegetable, let all that soak into some rice, add in some really fresh, crispy vegetables that are just lightly sauteed. Like you don't want to let everything cook into a mush, but keep that freshness in there and bring that flavor profile up. And just be easy on the seasoning because you don't really need much.
No. And honestly, I was referring to the difference between chicken or beef or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I much prefer the flavor of chicken broth.
And
I like all of it.
When I was a kid and I was sick, my grandmother always gave me chicken soup, and there is something magical about the chicken fat and schmaltz. And there's been some scientific studies on this. There is something, I don't want to say magical, but scientific behind the fact that it helps you recover when your immune system's been a little worn down.
It only gets magical when you have loved that bird for years and it had ample time to do its chicken thing on the foods it was supposed to be on with all the bugs and the grass. And then it's different and it's special.
I like to say all my chickens, and I stole this from Jill Salatin, they have an incredible life and one really bad day. But it's my goal to give them the best possible chicken life that they can, because I believe that transfers to the health and vitality of the bird, and it transfers to the health and vitality of its offspring and to the people who consume that. to sustain them.
That's true.
Yep.
You are what you eat.
Yes, indeed. What about, going to shift gears here just slightly because we're getting now close to the end here, but what about the old-fashioned methods of culling birds to eat or to remove from the flock, period? For example, I'll just throw this out here. I think there is an advantage to continuously removing non-layers or poor performers from the flock because that's going to keep your feed costs down.
And no need keeping non-productive birds.
No, it's just dead weight, no pun intended. But
well, you need to hatch out
bird.
a certain number to maintain your genetic pool and your sustainability, which means the rule of tens, we hatch 100 chicks, we're going to keep maybe 10 to breed forward, 10 out of 100. So that means 90 of those birds are never going to potentially even reach full maturity. So where do they go? On a dinner plate or somebody's dinner plate. I would hate to think you're just hatching birds and then, not utilizing them as a resource.
I'm at the point where I need to share out some growth rate to help other people see that it is possible. So we've adopted a blanket 50% calling into the freezer approach and then sharing out 40% of who's better than freezer grade and then retaining 10%. But I'm always continuously looking for birds to call, especially since we rescued this little super cute, pathetic little Yorkie who seems to be excelling on more of a raw diet. And I just ran out of turkey yesterday. So I'm going to go out to the barn today and I'm going to look for one bird. And I'm going to process that one bird today and I'm going to get it prepped for that little dog. And that'll last her a couple days before I got to go thaw some beef out or venison or pick another chicken.
And that's something that I noticed. My father adopted my old Jack Russell Terrier who had a lot of issues and was aged, and he put him on a raw diet and the improvement was astounding.
Just her skin condition, she was getting really greasy. And I looked into that because I've never had a Yorkie before. It's not my kind of dog, really. I prefer German Shepherds. And she had a lot of eye gunk that was giving off the impression that she had some food allergies going on. And I tried a couple of different types of kibble, nothing changed. I read through ingredients, did a cost analysis on pre-manufactured raw foods, and I wasn't crazy about that. So I'm going to shop my flock and find her protein that way.
There you go. I was talking with our favorite poultry nutritionist about my new puppy here. He's like, well, you've got all these quail. You know what? They are perfect. Just remove the gizzard and you could not get a more perfect meal.
A quail a day keeps the doctor away.
Yeah. Okay. But unfortunately, they're paying the bills right now. So I can't even afford to my dog quail because other people are paying me to feed their dogs quail.
Well, you need some more space.
It's the winter. I can't keep my waterers from freezing up right now.
Mm.
That makes
keeping them alive.
Tedious.
And they're particularly sensitive to any disruption. They find creative ways to unalive themselves.
I've heard that about quail. I only tried them once a long time ago, and I didn't pursue it because my setup was not conducive to keeping them contained. And every time I went to check on them, I lost one or two to escape.
They do that. No, but there's always a use for your birds. If you're not going to eat them yourself, reach out local marketplaces. There's families that they'll be happy to take a bird, even if it's alive. If you don't want to do the unaliving yourself, there's people who will come and take them and take care of that for you and make sure that life is not wasted and goes on to sustain other people who may not be in a financial situation to.
Yeah, this is true. We have a couple of families that we work with, and I did have some recent correspondence with the Cincinnati Zoo, but I'm probably not going to pursue that because of how much they want. I can't even come close to fulfilling that.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a raptor recovery center. There's 2 of them here in Vermont, and they'll take birds. They insist on them being alive.
See, the one, we have a raptor rescue just 10 minutes away, and they have to have day old. No exceptions. I was like, well, I can't do it a day old. I like to grow everybody up to dinner size.
Sure. And the pet industry, feeders, all the chicks, they want chicks. So there are ethical outlets for your culls. But as long as you're continuously removing birds, you're keeping your costs down. And as feed costs and infrastructure costs rise, the bottom line gets thinner and thinner.
Like, for example, if you have, let's say there's 12 hens in a pen and you're averaging 10 eggs a day, and you never get 11 or 12 eggs a day, just 10. So that means you have one or two that aren't laying at all, or there's a couple who are laying less than the others. So it becomes really beneficial to figure out why, if there's 12 there, you're getting 10 eggs. And if there's a bird or two that needs to come out, or if half of them are slower at laying than the others, you can go through and figure out your better breeding stock out of that laying situation by identifying who is laying what, how often, and how. And then you can trim off your wasteful birds who are just taking up space and not producing anything. If you can keep those moving out so that you can replace them with favorable pullets from the better producing birds, in the long run, it's just going to make your flock stronger and healthier and better producing.
You're breeding yourself towards better, more efficient production. A hen that lays 5 eggs per week versus a hen that lays 3 eggs per week is still going to cost you the same to feed and board.
And the same space for housing. Which one's better?
So she can go to a backyard flock, somebody who doesn't mind, that level of production, or a freezer or somewhere else.
Yeah, as long as you do full disclosure there. Like, you don't want to take your problem birds that you're calling out and then place them into another flock without full disclosure, because there's way too many people. If you scroll through Facebook rehoming groups or Craigslist, and people have like 1, 2, or 3 birds they're trying to unload, sometimes that might be a really aggressive bird. That might be a poor producing bird. That might be a bird that's never laid an egg in its life.
And it's a huge biohazard coming onto the farm.
Right.
No, thank you.
Too.
I'm out.
No. Know your breeder, know your birds, know why they're getting out of them. If there's birds up for removal from the flock that they're not willing to terminally call. Because if I have a bird, like, there was an instance a couple years ago where I had a pen of pullets, and this pen had, like 7 birds in it that I was growing out to wait and see what they did. I go in there, one of them scalped, like that whole flap of skin was pulled back. And I was like, wow, that's a level of aggression I don't like to see. So I'm looking for the culprit. So I found one who had her face covered in blood, and she was otherwise fine. So I pulled her out, and then just to see how she would act, I put her in another group of older pullets. Wouldn't you know, she went in there and tried to tear them all up too.
Oh, gosh.
A month younger, going in there like, I'm in charge. You're going to listen to me. And if you're not going to bow down to my leadership, I'm going to tear you up. So that one got paired with dumplings. And I didn't have that.
Never tolerate aggression.
Hanging around. I look for any reason, really, because we're hungry. We eat a lot of chicken. Now we've got this dog that eats chicken. I'm not shy.
And you have the numbers to select from.
And I have an incubator to just keep it going.
Just keep it going.
Call it out. Hatch more.
For people who don't have that much space.
It gets a little tricky then. I ended up, because I used to have a much smaller coop, and then I started seeing what all I could be looking for and selecting for. And then I realized how many pens that would take. And then I realized how many birds that might take. And we just kept expanding until I found like a comfortable position that met our needs. And it turns out that's a giant barn, multiple pens, dedicated hatch room. But it's smooth sailing with everything where it needs to be, and our freezer doesn't run out.
And I'm more at the carry over a dozen as my breeding stock expand out in the spring, grow them out, cull them down, get ready for fall. Again, looking at those fast molting birds in the fall. To me, that's huge, because for a month or longer, they're out of production completely. That's more money spent.
Yeah, and you definitely want to pay attention to how long their break is. Is it 4 weeks or is it 4 months? Because if it's 4 months, I mean, what's the cutoff of how long you let a bird stay on break from that big 18-month molt? Do you give them until that whole next spring to start laying again?
That first molt, I kind of do. I want to see what they're going to, but just watching them, observing them, you can, picking them up, feeling them, going, oh, you know what? You're about ready to start eating again.
I've had birds take every bit of 5, 6, 7 months before they thought about laying another egg. And then
But
I would
she's got
watch
to be an
production after that.
outstanding bird that I'm really looking greatly forward to breeding with.
That's true.
To,
It's a balancing act.
to give her that time. But by the time I'm there, yeah, I've already decided this is a great bird. I've done some test hatches from her. I like what she's throwing, and I really want to get those second and third year eggs out of her for breeding.
And I've started keeping birds annually so that then I have the luxury of letting the old ladies do what they're going to do and show me how long are they going to molt? When do they come back into production? What is that production like? And then in the meantime, I've got pullet eggs keeping us well supplied in omelets.
Mm-hmm. And you've done some matings and hatched out eggs from those birds. You know what they're throwing forward.
Yeah, it's their offspring keeping us afloat until they go back into production.
Right. You betcha. But you're looking for any genetic defects. You're not finding any. You're prepping them for that second and third year breeding.
I'm thinking about if I like the results enough to keep them with the same male they had, or if I want to change out to a different male to see something a little bit different.
Yeah. I mean, now you're popping chicks, and I caught myself doing this right out of the hatcher. I'm looking at skull, width, and length, going, yes, no, nope, yes.
If you can see eyeballs, they're not wide enough.
Yeah, rip. I mean, the
Who
selection
was it that taught
process.
us that?
I don't know.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, I'm also selecting based on where in the hatch. The first chicks to hatch and the last chicks to hatch. Nope, they're automatically, out of consideration for future breeding because
So
I'm
I
going
do
for that
crop
middle
off
of
the
the bell
last
curve.
The last ones to hatch, I do take them out of contention because for whatever reason they struggled and we don't want struggle. But in my experience, sometimes I will get one chick hatch a good 10 hours before anybody else, and it's always a cockerel. Like he nominated himself to come out as the flock leader and call everybody else out. Because then when I watch that chick continue to grow, he really is the first one that comes up to the feeder, the first one that comes. He was the first to do absolutely everything, including hatch. So it depends.
Now that I've got a great incubator and hatching set up, I can do that. Before, I had decent equipment, but my hatch window was so long.
I like to see it be about 14 hours or so with maybe one or two stragglers on either end.
Mm-hmm.
Seems typical for us now.
And having a good incubator and having your system dialed and having your birds dialed, there's a lot that goes into it. How long those eggs sat on the counter before you put them in the incubator? What was the temperature?
Were they turned or not?
Oh my gosh, that's a whole, future podcast or 3.
Christmas, a friend of mine linked me up with a set of the little GoV sensor thingies. So I downloaded the app and I put one of them in each unit. And that really let me dial in to within 0.5% of a degree. Like this hatch that should be hatching today or tomorrow, night and day for what I was doing before. And I was able to make some adjustments.
And set yourself some alarms and let you know if bad things happen inside your incubators or hatchers. That's a great thing.
How long the app hangs on to the data of what the incubators were doing, that's pretty handy too, because it lets me see the swings and the shifts. And if I need to account for anything in the ambient conditions, pretty neat.
We kind of know how we're doing it in the, I'm going to make air quotes and say backyard flocks here. How do the big hatcheries produce next year's breeders? Right? Anybody have any insight into the big commercial world?
I hope Rich does, because I don't.
Basically, what they're doing is they are fulfilling orders first. And if you notice, most of the big hatcheries have a cutoff date. Or they select their birds based on the ones that are still laying in their flock late in the year.
Good idea.
So that's, a lot of folks think they've crossed different breeds and all this, and that's really not the case. It's just a simple matter of selection, intentional or otherwise.
Okay. We know that we've got, 200 eggs that we need to ship on this date or set on this date. So we need this many hens laying this many
Selecting from the fall layers, those are usually your more productive layers because just about any chicken is laying in May. But by the time you get to September, how many are still laying?
True.
Well, I saw an interview with somebody from Murray McMurray Hatchery about hatching in the fall, specifically to have chickens that are laying eggs in the spring for breeding in the spring. That's actually I can't remember where that came from, but that was kind of inspirational because I went, oh, that's kind of what I do.
I sort of do that, but I'm not looking to hatch from those spring layers if they were a fall hatch because they're not going to be old enough yet. I still have some other growth milestones that they may need to meet, but I could certainly be hatching from them by July or August.
Thank you for joining us this week. And before you go, make sure you subscribe to our podcast so you can receive new episodes right when they're released, and they're released every Tuesday. And if you're enjoying this podcast, we'd like to ask you to drop us an email at poultrykeeperspodcast@gmail.com and share your thoughts about the show. So thank you again for joining us for this episode of the Poultry Keepers Podcast. We'll see you next week.